heard me say this. A bio is kind of only for your mother. It's the things that your mother wants people to know about you. So I'm good with you just knowing that I have transit experience from Rock Region Metro. I ran an association that instead of one state, it was 8 states for 13 years. I have been, and I'm currently the president of CTAA. How many of you know what the Community Transportation Association of America is? Raise your hand. CTAA. Okay, great organization. You're going to hear from Taylor tomorrow, but I'm the board president there. More importantly, for the last 10 years, I have been working, I'm going to pull this off, because I'm just too short back there. So there really is a person here. For the last 10 years, I have been working in this space, human trafficking, as it relates to public transportation. And so I want to tell you right up front, this is going to be a PG-13 conversation. I hold back, but I don't hold back much, okay? Because it's a serious topic that's affecting all of our communities, and it's hiding in plain sight. And we don't want it in our communities at all. And I'm going to be talking to you about statistics. I'll be talking about how it intersects with public transportation, how public transportation is part of the problem, and how public transportation is part of the solution. Okay, so the front end of this is going to be really heavy. I'm going to be telling you some stories and sharing information that may make you feel like, oh my gosh, and we're at the end of the day, and I thought this was supposed to be a happy topic. But I will tell you, there's a place that it turns that will give you hope and will allow you to actually do something about this topic. Okay, so just bear with me in the first little bit. I'm also going to be shortening my presentation so that everybody who needs to get out of here at 4:30, please do not leave before 4:30. But at 4:30, no matter what I'm doing, I'm stopping and I'm letting you go, okay? So we're going to see which one of us beats the clock, all right? Because this is a very important topic. And it's so important, I've come up with a mantra, okay? And my mantra is not on my bus, not on my train, not in my community. And I share that mantra with every transit community that I go into. And I want to share it with you now, and I want it to be yours. So here we are at the end of the day, you're kind of settled in. Some of you are checking emails, some of you are checking your texts and all that. But I want you, as you're able, I want you to stand up, and I want you to repeat after me. Everybody stand up. Not on my bus. Not on my train. Not in my community. That was, you know what, y'all were, no, don't sit down yet. That is really awesome. Most groups at this time of the day go, not on my bus, not on my train. But I think that you guys have enough energy, you can do it even more robustly. Not on my bus. Not on my train. Not in my community. And all the people said, Amen. Amen. Oh yeah, some of you are from the South, I can tell. Amen. Sit down. Thank you. Thank you. So that's my mantra, and by the end of this, I hope that this is also your mantra. I don't read many slides, but I do want to start with this one. This is from a national survey called the Polaris Myths, Facts, and Statistics book. They found that traffickers often rely upon the transportation industry in every phase of human trafficking for recruitment, moving, controlling victims, and for delivering victims to buyers who will complete their exploitation through either commercial sex or forced labor ventures. How many of you have seen the movie Taken or the TV show? How many of you have seen the movie Sound of Freedom? Okay. So those of you who have been introduced to this through either of those movies, I want you to know that's just a little sliver of the pie that's called human trafficking. I want you to understand what human trafficking truly is and who it's affecting. So on the screen you see labor trafficking. I hope some of you can see all the way in the back. There are yellow words on the screen, and I'm gonna read, and when we get to the yellow words, I want you to read what's up here. And if you can't read it, that's okay, you'll hear me do it, but let's try to do it together. So labor trafficking, two forms of trafficking by law, labor trafficking and sex trafficking. Labor trafficking can even be subsetted into domestic servitude. Okay, so let's hear what the kind of the legal definition is. So forced labor is a situation in which victims are forced to work against their own will under the threat of violence or some other form of punishment. Their freedom is restricted and a degree of ownership is exerted. That goes into the legal definition of that. So let's move over here to sex trafficking, where I want you to now read the red words, okay? Sex trafficking. Individuals are compelled to engage in a commercial sex act through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. When a person under 18 years old is induced to perform a commercial sex act, it is a crime regardless whether there is force, fraud, or coercion. So sometimes that's kind of the harder one for people to understand. They go, huh? All right, so if a person is over the age of 18 and they're caught in a commercial sex act, then it has to be proven that there was force, fraud, or coercion in order for the individual not to go to jail and for certain things to take place within the law, okay? But if you're under the age of 18, force, fraud, or coercion does not have to be proven. So let me give you an example. 17-year-old girl, this is a true story, North Carolina. I work with an organization that helps girls 12 to 18 years of age who have been trafficked in North Carolina. 17-year-old, she now is 19, almost 20 years old. And Hannah gets a call. Hannah runs the organization. Hannah gets a call from the police department, and they said, Hannah, we need you to come down here because we have somebody who is saying that they're not a trafficking victim, but she's showing all of the signs. And we want to make sure that if she is a human trafficking victim, that we help her the best we can. So Hannah gets there, and she's talking to this girl, and she says, tell me your story. And she said, well, my story is this was my choice. I chose what I did, and I choose whatever it is that's done to me. And so Hannah said, well, tell me more about that. So through the course of several hours and really a lot of different interviews, this girl, when she was 17, she was an honor student at the high school. She wanted to get into college. Her parents couldn't afford it, so she was studying really hard for her SATs and ACTs after school. And she would walk down to the local convenience store that was real close to the high school, get snacks, and go back. She did that every single day. A guy was in there, and over the weeks, he's grooming her, talking to her, and convinces her that he's in love with her, and he's her boyfriend. So, of course, 17, you're thrilled. Do you know at what age your brain actually develops the cognitive part of it that lets you reason and say, what? About what? How old? Yeah, between 23, 25, I like to say 24. Before then, you don't have a brain. Okay, and we know that by the way teenagers act. We know that because an 18-year-old, you can tell on the battlefield, go take that hill, and before you even finish the sentence, that 18-year-old is running up the hill to kill or do whatever it is that's up at the top of the hill. But a 25-year-old, go take that hill, the 25-year-old is going to go, I don't know about that. I don't know that that's really in my best interest. There's something in the brain that says that. But someone under 18 doesn't have that ability to say, this might not be the best thing. So she has this boyfriend, and he says, hey, today after school, I'm going to pick you up, and we're going to go somewhere. Picks her up, takes her to a house, says, okay, you love me, right? And you know I love you. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, so I need you to do something for me. I need you to go into that house, and there's a guy in there, and you need to have sex with him because I have a drug debt that I have to pay, and I need you to go in there and take care of this drug debt. Okay, so the first thing that you heard about was the fraud. I love you. Okay, I'm your boyfriend. That's the fraud. So now he says the coercion, I need you to go in there and I need you to do this because you're my girlfriend. Coercion goes a little bit further when she says, no, I'm not going to do that. He says, well, take a look at this. And he shows her a picture of her 10-year-old sister coming out of elementary school. And he says, I don't care who goes in there. I've got the debt to pay. It's either going to be you or it's going to be her. So which one is it? It's your choice. She chose to go into the house that day. And many things happened to her life past that she had no control over because she chose. And Hannah looked at her and said, but did you really have a choice? I was going to ask you that. Did she have a choice? It was her life or her sister's life. And there was something going on at home or something somewhere that kept her locked in that she couldn't tell anybody. And when she got in there, it was all the shame. And there were pictures taken and videos taken. And we're going to share this on social media. And all of the things that go along with sex trafficking to keep a person in. And so that then gets into that whole coercion. Force is when they drugged her to continue this behavior. That was the force. So hope that you understand that she didn't have a choice. There was force, fraud, and coercion, whether she was under the age of 18 or over the age of 18. So where is this happening? Is it really happening? You can see from the map, this is the National Human Trafficking Hotline heat map of all the calls that have come in. This is 2021. So all the calls that have come in, there are calls, confirmed calls of every single state, all 50 states. And you'll see that some areas are blown up bright red, some areas don't have anything at all. A lot of times it's because there's more cows than people in that area. A lot of times it's that the kind of trafficking that's going on might be familia. Familia trafficking is when a mother, father, aunt, uncle, sister, what brother traffics someone for drugs in there, and it's someone in the family that's doing that, which is really where the rural issue happens. That's really the rural story mostly. I'm not going to go into all of this, but these are the different kinds of businesses where you find trafficking. The white are all cases of sex trafficking that were reported to the hotline. The blue are all the cases of labor trafficking, and the green are the cross-section between both labor and sex trafficking. So there's things on here like outdoor solicitation, bars, strip clubs, cantinas, agriculture and animal husbandry, hotels, hospitality. So all kinds of different things there. There's one here is forced begging. Forced begging looks like this. There was a rail platform on the eastern seaboard, one of the big cities over there, where women were sitting holding babies and they were begging for money. So someone reported it, they investigated it. Come to find out, these women were being forced to beg, and they were given drugged babies to hold at the rail platform as a prop. And the babies were just passed around from woman to woman. They had a $500 amount that they had to raise each day before they could be released from the platform. And it wasn't just one rail platform, it was all up and down. They discovered it was all up and down the eastern seaboard. It was a whole ring that was going on. So labor trafficking right there. So what's happening in Utah? This is again from 2021, this particular set of information. So what types of trafficking are happening in Utah? So there were 32 reported cases of sex trafficking that happened at a massage spa business. It was pornography. It was a residence-based commercial sex. Think about that. It's in your neighborhood. hotel, motel based, and then oh, the other was 32, so sorry, so 32, 42, 52, 62, 66, 67, about 67 if I have my math done right, it might be off just a little bit, of sex trafficking. There were 64 of sex, 4 of labor, and 3 of sex and labor. Those are the numbers here. Who did it affect? 54 adults, 14 minors. Of those, 64 were females, 8 were males. And then they had citizenships where the ones that they could get, 7 were foreign nationals and 4 were U.S. citizens. So that's kind of a picture of what's going on in Utah, but I want to share with you, if I can get it to work, you guys hold your breath here. Okay.
Facing 13 felony charges accused of having sex with an underage girl while visiting St. George last year.
ABC4's Katie Corrales met with the chief of investigations for the Utah Attorney General's office, who says sex trafficking in southern Utah is a major concern.
I met with Chief Leo Lucy, who says most people are indifferent. Well, that sex trafficking is a real threat here in southern Utah, but with its proximity to Las Vegas and moderate climate, the area is ideal for traffickers' primary targets.
Daryl Hopper is accused of traveling with a child prostitute from Las Vegas to St. George. Police say the 31-year-old admitted to having sex every day for nearly 3 weeks with the 17-year-old Las Vegas runaway. Authorities say sex trafficking will be a constant and ongoing battle for law enforcement and the St. George community.
They think they can make money in St. George at any given time. They'll send those young women up here.
Lucy said southern Utah's climate and proximity to major cities are ideal for runaways and the homeless, human traffickers' main targets.
They'll watch parks, they'll watch malls, they'll watch high schools, junior highs.
And with narcotics funneled heavily along I-15 from south of the nation's border, police say traffickers can quickly enslave victims by getting them addicted to drugs.
Once they get them in, they pretty much own them.
St. George police say detectives are actively investigating human trafficking, and while they can't discuss how and when sting operations take place, they say they're conducted at least several times a year.
We want to be able to locate and rescue them and get the help they need.
Authorities say they see a rotation every 7 to 8 months, with young women trafficked from Las Vegas to St. George, to Salt Lake City, to Washington State and California, and then back again. In St. George, I'm Katie Corrales, ABC4 News.
Okay, so that's what's happening in Utah, just in case you did not know that. Let me get this back going again. Okay, good deal. Everything is working, it's so awesome. Okay, so I want to tell you the difference between human smuggling and human trafficking, because there is a definite difference. Human smuggling is a crime against a border. Human trafficking is a crime against a person. Those are the two key differences, okay? Human smuggling, the individual typically agrees to be smuggled. Actually, in all the cases, they say, yes, I want to be taken across this border. Sometimes they're paying money. Sometimes they're just turning over documents that will be given to them later on, and someone else will pay the money on the other side. But it does require being transported across an international border. Human trafficking requires, what did we all talk about? Force, fraud, and coercion, right? That's used to recruit, manipulate a victim. But the victim, the initial consent of the victim does not negate the crime. So think about our 17-year-old who said, I chose, and she didn't choose. That's a perfect example of that it did not negate the crime just because she said, okay, I'll go in there. The other thing is that with human trafficking, the victim does not have to be moved or transported. Many of victims, particularly children or people who are disabled, they are trafficked in their own home, the home that they live in, by the people who are supposed to love and take care of them. So many people believe that human trafficking only impacts children. but it truly is all ages, all ages, genders, races, nationalities, and it happens in rural, urban, and tribal environments. As a matter of fact, tribal people in this part of the country are trafficked typically 3 to 4 times the number of everyone else in the population. So about 25% of the trafficking victims are going to be tribal members. And I'll tell you why. I met with a tribal police officer, and that police officer said that she was recruited by the FBI to go on a sting operation. She was transported from Montana to Minnesota. When she got to Minnesota, it was a man camp. It had to do with, I think it was an oil field kind of, or gas pipeline kind of situation. And she got there and she said there were 3 trailers sitting over behind a fence. One was pink, one was yellow, one was blue. And she said the pink one was for people who had a proclivity for females. The blue one was for people who had the proclivity for males. The yellow was called the exotics trailer. And the people in there were typically Native Americans, pregnant women, people with disabilities. And they were being trafficked at this man camp, depending on what their particular thing was. And I'll tell you that every FBI agent that I have spoken to and every victim that I have had the great honor to talk to, the survivors, say that it starts with pornography. And the age limit of the access to pornography, it starts right around age 9 or 10 years old. And I'm talking about the people watching the pornography. I'm not talking, I mean, it starts much younger for the victims, but for the people engaged in pornography, it's now starting at age 9 to 10. Nationally, that's what we're seeing. So let's talk a little bit about how you identify. So these are common indicators. So if somebody comes on your vehicle or you know them in your community and they aren't in control of their own ID of some kind, they don't have control of that, or their movements are restricted. They're not. You see them get off like in a group at a might be a truck stop. It might be at a transfer center, transfer center, and they're kept from going to the bathroom until there's someone standing at the door that can watch their coming and going. Lacking knowledge or logical means of reaching the final destination. They just don't know who's going to meet them at the end of the line. They have no idea, or even where they're going. Maybe you see somebody that's younger and you see somebody that's older and they clearly don't go together. And maybe they're looking fearful, anxious, depressed, submissive, paranoid. Okay, which could describe many of our bus riders in many of our cities. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily being trafficked, but there certainly is trauma there. And I encourage everyone in the transit industry, work with your mental health community and get educated on trauma. Get your bus drivers educated on trauma and how to deal with people who have experienced trauma. Because they may or may not have been trafficked, but they sure need help. Know that these things it's not just one thing. It's usually 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you start noticing and conversations that you have. Maybe you hear them talking about that they have a manager, or maybe it's a minor that you know is a minor, but you hear them or overhear somebody else talking about them engaged in a commercial sex act. If you hear somebody that is being deprived of food, water, or sleep, medical care, or life necessities. I did read a story that just came out 2 weeks ago in the state. The guy who runs, I think it's the Farm Bureau for the state of Utah, has just been arrested for assault and suspicion of trafficking. And it has to do with the laborers that are working his farm. And they decided to speak out about it. There were 14 to 16 men living in one building that was just in squalor with a septic tank that wasn't working properly. They didn't have access to things that they needed, and they were being forced to pay rent, all 16 of them living in one house. So that's a story that's coming up. But remember, it's never just one thing of these things you see, it's several. If you want to start passing out those cards. Oh, are done, okay, good. And everybody should have cards at your table. I made a point of getting these printed off. I'm going to show you how you can get these printed for, the artwork is free. You have to pay for the printing yourself at your own local place. But this is a card that every single, and did you need more? Because you're welcome to do as many. Okay. It's a card that will give you an idea of what the indicators are and how to report. So I'm going to skip this slide right here. Here is what I want you to understand. A group of survivors of human trafficking, this group of 104 survivors, 33% of them said that public buses, were used in the facilitation of their exploitation. 33% of 104. Okay, that's a big number. So that's where public transportation is part of the problem. We're being utilized that way. However, this same group said, 26% of them said that some form of transit was used in at least one of their exit attempts. And they say at least one because it takes 3 to 5 times for a human trafficking victim to actually fully escape, because they need to have services, they need to be able to have education, they need mental health services, they need a job that is outside of what they already have been experiencing. So this is where I always say public transportation is part of the problem and we're part of the solution. So labor trafficking, you can find it in domestic servitude, agriculture, janitorial, I've already talked about the begging, food service, sweatshop, farming, road work, all kinds of things. So what can we do to help in both of these situations? First of all, get educated, which is what this is. This is an introduction to this topic. Some of you may have already taken this on in your agency and you know about this, but getting educated and educating our frontline staff. Know your policies. So when I was working with a large transit agency, they had 300 bus operators that they had a mandatory safety training on a Sunday night in January. They invited me in to do a 2-hour presentation on human trafficking. Well, guess what? This particular city, their NFL team was playing in the NFL playoffs for the Super Bowl. So it was a Sunday night, and I've got 300 pretty angry bus operators in this room already. All right? We had to keep stopping and say, okay, what's the score now? What's the score now? So I was there. We get to this part where what can we do as bus operators? And as a matter of fact, several of them shared that they knew this was going on at their transfer center. They see it with runaways. The runaways show up. The trafficker walks up and says something like, "You're too pretty to be crying. You need to be starring in my next music video." And off they go. So they're seeing it, and they call the bus drivers called their own transfer center the pit of hell. And that's what the survivors in this particular city called it as well, the pit of hell, the transfer center. So the bus drivers are revved up, they're ready to go, they want to know what's going on, and I was really new at giving this presentation. So I look around the room to find out, okay, how do you want them to report? We have a national hotline number, which by the way is 888-3737-888. Look at your card, it's on there. Everybody repeat it after me. 888-3737-888. label it National Human Trafficking Hotline so that you can call them anonymously, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Let me get back to my story. So I'm there in this room, 300 bus drivers, angry already about being there. They're revved up. They know there's a problem. They want to do something about it. I look around and ask management, how do you want them to report? Guess where management was? At home watching the game. They left the building. So I'm telling you, if you're gonna do this topic at your transit agency or at your DOT, take it seriously and make sure that you have policies like Embark in Oklahoma City and many others. There's Santa Clara and all across the country. They've developed protocols. If you see something, you call dispatch and you use a code. I've got a 737 on board. What's your location? They tell them. And then they have law enforcement that can meet because they've worked out with law enforcement, they've worked out with social services in the area. If we see something, we're going to say something, we need you to help us to respond. Because we never tell a bus driver to intervene. We tell a bus driver to see something and say something. That's all they're supposed to do. It's up to management to figure out what the reporting is. Carry the wallet card I gave you. Ask questions in your building, ask questions of people who know about reporting and identification. Make sure you say something and notice the detail, just like you as professional drivers are trained to notice what color car was it? Did they come through the intersection first? Was the person who was walking out in front of you, were they texting? What were they wearing? How old was the person? All of those details you need to remember when you're reporting to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. What's that number again? 888? Perfect. Woo, you guys get an A for the day. A for the day. So reporting policies are one of the number one, definitely yes and somewhat yes. Frontline transit workers were asked, do you have concerns about misidentifying human trafficking? They said definitely yes or somewhat yes. That was more than 50%. So it comes in the training, and it also comes in reassuring that if you report to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, it's anonymous. Okay, and it would be much better to say something and have somebody who knows how to follow up on the lead do so than to not say something and end up with a 6-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 25-year-old living in that kind of hell. Your responsibility is to plant the seeds, and not necessarily to understand what's happened past that. So Embark, Oklahoma City, they have a program where they train their drivers not only on human trafficking awareness, but also on trauma-informed incidents and things that people go through that might cause them to act wonky, okay? And so one day, a bus driver from Embark, he had someone jump on his bus. She was acting erratically, and the other bus rider said, "Get her off of here, stop and get her off of here. We don't want her on here." But she was saying some things that he had heard in his training. So he turns to her and says, "Come up here, sit behind me. I'm going to get you the help you need." They go on, he follows protocol, he calls dispatch, we have a 787 on board, "I will meet you at the transfer center." When they got to the transfer center, everybody else got off, he told her to stay on. A supervisor and a manager came on, talked to her. She would not get off the bus. She said people were following her. She had been trafficked. Well, she didn't say she'd been trafficked. She said people were selling me for sex. And so she said, "I'm not getting off this bus." They brought blankets out, covered her up, got her into the building. And when they got in there, they had someone from law enforcement and from social services in there who then talked to her and got her story. The story is she was picked up in California, and she was trafficked from California to Oklahoma City for 2 weeks. She was brutalized for 2 weeks. She saw an opportunity to escape, and she did, and she ran for the bus and jumped on the bus. And because of the training that that bus driver had, it saved her life. She's now out of that life, and she has decided to make her home in Oklahoma because because that's where her new life now can begin. So I won't play this video for you, but I want you to know that the Oklahoma Transit Association got a grant from the federal government, and they created a rolling Oklahoma classroom. It's a refurb bus that goes all over the state, and it does education on crime prevention, safety, and human trafficking awareness. And I can send out the link to the video so that you can see that. In South Dakota last week, I was there for 2 days. We developed a 2-day human trafficking awareness workshop that included people from all over the state, from the FBI, from tribal liaisons. We had 3 survivors of human trafficking speak and tell their stories. We had people there talking about what individuals can do in the community, and then we had time with the people that were there to discuss, okay, now that you've heard all of this, how are we going to make a difference? 2 days, it was awesome. But one thing that the transit agency did is they wrapped their vehicles. This is free artwork that you can get from a site called safety4transit.org. Safety4transit.org. You can get artwork from there. You can, we're going to soon upload videos from that 2-day workshop that you're going to be able to hear those survivor stories. You're going to be able to hear the FBI agent talking about child sex exploitation. So at that website, safety4transit.org, you're going to find free resources for a labor toolkit, a Native American toolkit. You're going to find a slide presentation that your transit workers can sit down in a training room and go through it all by themselves. You'll also find a social media toolkit on the demand side of the demand side of this. So I want to share with you a video. And this is a video that is part of this package. Imagine it being on your vehicles on a kiosk or used in a training situation where you only have 10 minutes to train, so you show this, you give the card to your drivers, and you talk through a couple of things. Y'all didn't see that face I made. Okay. There is no.
Human trafficking is a violation of human rights and impacts people of any age, gender, race, or nationality. Forced labor and domestic servitude, also known as labor trafficking in the United States, can be found in different industries, including roofing, construction, agriculture, hospitality, restaurants, and factories. Indicators of this crime may include being under the control of another person, doesn't speak up for themselves, lives and works in the same location, or is fearful of their employer. Many labor trafficking victims and their families are required to work off financial debt to their abuser, known as debt bondage. Traffickers also threaten foreign national victims with arrest and deportation if they seek help and confiscate their personal identifying documents as a means of control. The transportation industry has an important role in the fight against labor trafficking in rural, urban, and tribal communities. Frontline workers and members of the community can be vital resources to help identify both domestic and immigrant trafficking victims. If you suspect signs of labor or sex trafficking, please contact the National Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888 or text HELP to 233-733.
Okay, that video focuses on labor trafficking. There's another one that's more general on sex and labor trafficking together, and they are available in English, Spanish, and simple Chinese. We were able to get those all done. There's also
La trata de personas es un delito contra adultos.
okay, so just to prove that we did that. There's also a set of posters. They're in English, Spanish, simple Chinese. They're sized all different sizes. Let's see, I'm drop down here. Like this one right here, we put it in bathroom stalls in a public bathroom. Because we know that trafficking victims, The bathroom is sometimes the only place that they have where they're by themselves and they can actually read something like this, and they might have their moment of clarity that allows them to escape and call that number. The wallet card on the right, just focus on this card on the right. That's what you have on your table. The artwork is free on all of this stuff, free. It was paid for by your tax dollars through the Federal Transit Administration, and you guys get the benefit of it. You download it, you take it, you send it to a printer, and they print it off. This is a small version of this toolkit for Native Americans. Any of you who work with Native Americans or a member of a tribe, this is an excellent resource that you can download. It's a PDF, and you can send it to tribal leaders, tribal police, to anyone in your transit agency that works with Native people. And this is a great resource for them. So the key thing is we can all do our part. And it's simple. We just need to be educated, know the policy, see something, say something. So I think I may have 3 minutes left. 6 minutes. I get to take questions. Okay? So questions, or I can, I think what I want to do is I want to end on a really good story. But let me ask, does anybody have any questions? Or comments or anything? Okay, let me tell you one more good news transit story. So Liz is a woman that I met in Phoenix, Arizona. She was telling her story that when she was 6 years old, she was trafficked for the first time by her mother. And as she's telling her story, you might think, okay, her mother must have been drug addicted. Her mother must have been, sorry, this thing keeps going out. Her mother must have been poor or unemployed. There must have been some reason this happened. But you know what? Liz's mother was an RN, middle class neighborhood, and she sold her daughter at 6 years old because she could. Liz has no idea why it happened other than that. She just could. So Liz then continued to be trafficked by her mother to the point that by the time she was around 12, 13 years of age, she could get on any public transit system on the eastern seaboard, and she could figure out how to get to her dates on her own. Whether it was on the metro or it was on a bus, no matter what it was, taxi, didn't matter. By the time she was in her 20s, she had had 5 different traffickers. And one night, one of them beat her up so badly, she said, "I can't live like this anymore. I will die." And she fled from him. She went to a bus stop. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. She was not dressed appropriately for the weather. And a bus driver pulls up. His name is Paul, and he opens the door, and he looks at her, and he says, "How can I help you?" Liz said it was the first time since she was 6 years old that anybody saw her as a person. Paul got her on the bus. She said, "I can't pay your fare. I can give you sex, but I don't have any money." He says, "That's not why I brought you on this bus." He gives her a coat, and he gives her a sandwich that his wife had made for his lunch that day. And she said it was the best sandwich and the worst sandwich she had ever eaten. He then commences to take her to a shelter for her to get help and for her to start her new life. She says that now she works for Truckers Against Trafficking, and she tells her story. She's now in her late 30s, early 40s. She's just gotten married right post-COVID. All good news stories. But it all started with a bus driver who said, "How can I help you?" And then knew what to do, how to be compassionate. I want us all to be Paul, the bus driver, when we leave here. Understanding that The issue that we have in our society is that we don't see people anymore, and we need to. Thank you very much for staying. Now with that, we're going to adjourn this way unless there's something else. I want you to stand. And I want you to repeat after me. Everybody stand. I gave you my mantra. I gave you the reason to have it. Now I want to hear you say it like you mean it this time. Not on my bus. Not on my bus. Not on my train. Not on my train. Not in my community. Not in my community. You guys go forth and prosper. Namby Nanu.